IT, do we actually have to congratulate the Celtics for winning the finals this year? I mean, come on. Like the entire Eastern Conference was hurt. They played the Heat without Jimmy Butler. They played the Cavs without Mitchell. The Pacers, Halliburton was injured. And outside the rest of the Eastern Conference as well, too. Like Embiid went down, Anunoby went down. The entire Knicks starting five went down. It was Giannis as well, too. I mean, the East sucked. Of course, they won the East. And then they're going to play like the sixth best team in the West in the finals. I mean, come on. Do we actually have to? We do. Okay. It's fine. It's fine. We'll do. No, it's okay. We'll do it. We'll do it. It's okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Rem and Sam podcast. Congratulations to the Boston Celtics for winning the NBA Finals. The 2023-2024 NBA season is in the books. And I got to be honest, I have probably not been more bummed out that a season has been over. And I mean, I can admit, it's not like the finals games at the end were necessarily the most exhilarating games, edge of your seat. Like you got to be locked in the entire time. I guess some of, game 2, game 3, until Doncic even fouled out in game 3. And then it's like, okay, the end of this game is definitely not going to be as good as it could have potentially have been. But just in general, I would say an incredible season from the NBA. But let me think, if we had to give an NBA season a grade, IT didn't prep us for this. An NBA, I would say this probably like a B+ or an A- season. It might be an A- season, a B+ season in general. But in terms of how important I think live sports are to just the general entertainment and what's going on, just how good the movies and stuff have been lately. There's been good stuff, good movies and good TV shows, but man, it feels like we really have needed sports to carry the entertainment now more than ever. And just having NBA night to night at the end of the playoffs as well, too. Like we were saying, once we got to the conference finals and then the NBA finals here, where it was even games every other night, every 2 or 3 nights, that was already a challenge enough. But now that the NBA is going away for the entire season, there was a point in the game where it was like, okay, the Celtics are up by 20. You see where this is going. I mean, you saw where it was going even earlier than when they were up by 20. But when the game was really like, okay, the Mavs are probably not going to make the comeback here. It's not going to at least be a competitive game anyways. It seems like the Celtics have the finals clearly. There was a point where I really started to get a bit in my stomach because I was like, oh no, we've got to wait several months now for basketball to come back. And we'll get football back sooner as well, too. College football will be back. I get it. Sports will be back sooner than the NBA, but there is nothing like the night to night NBA. And just going into next season as well, too, knowing that next season is the last season for Inside the NBA on TNT, it's going to make that season even, more special just from a viewing standpoint as well, when we're talking about the entertainment aspect of basketball, because I mean, Inside the NBA might be just as entertaining as the basketball games themselves, which is pretty crazy that property is going to go away. Is the Inside the NBA better than the NBA basketball? It might be. And somehow the NBA basketball is going to make, close to $80 billion in their new media deal. And the best part of the NBA is going to go away because of it. It still doesn't make a lot of sense. But yeah, I'm already super looking forward to next season. And maybe it's Wembanyama as well, too. That's probably no surprise that the Spurs fans are definitely really excited for where the team's going to be. Looking forward to the offseason and the draft. But yeah, Wembanyama inside the NBA in its season series finale. It's going to be the 2024-2025 season is really, really going to be good. And this season did feel, again, like a really solid, I think, basketball season just in general. And I mean, me and Sam are degenerate basketball fans as well. So the bar to entertain us from an on-court standpoint is pretty low. We're going to be enjoying it no matter what. But I do feel like it was a really solid on-court season. But it did just feel like in general, there was a vibe. Something sort of shifted in the league this year. And I was trying to think about it before. And maybe it was just the fact that, it just shifted. Like it's realizing now how stacked the league is, because again, we're now 5 or 6 seasons removed from when the Warriors and the Cavs were playing each other in the finals every year. I guess the Raptors played the Warriors would have been 6 full seasons ago now at this point since we last saw. So that was like, the very end of the sort of super team era. But, anytime you're sort of in between eras and you're shifting the league, it's always those first few couple of years are always going to be a little weird. Like, okay, what's really, really going on here? So again, like I couldn't really put my finger totally on what the shift was for the vibe in the league, but it does feel like we're now enough separated from the super team eras. Cause again, it's not just the Warriors too. It was the Heat before that when LeBron joins Wade, they get Chris Bosh. So, I mean, you have a decade long stretch, probably even longer than that. I guess that Mavs Heat finals would have been the 2010, 2011 season. So if that Raptors Warriors finals is the 18-19 season, I mean, that's nearly a decade of the, the super team era. I guess there wasn't really a super team between them. And I don't know if I guess you can consider the early 2000s Lakers a super team just because they were so dominant, but not in terms of what we're talking about, I guess, in the way that they're assembled. But they did sign Shaq in free agency. But, it was mainly kind of a duo as well, too, versus the Warriors and the Heat were a big three. But again, being removed from that and the talent that has been injected into the league in the last 6 seasons since the super team thing is kind of broken up is really now. I mean, one, you're seeing like, would Tatum would have been in his second season at that point? Because I guess they would have played the Cavs in the conference finals in Tatum's rookie season against LeBron when they took him to 7 games and almost beat LeBron. LeBron had to play awesome in Game 7 in Boston as well too, if I remember that correctly. But yeah, so I mean, Tatum would have only been in his second season. I mean, obviously, Wemby wouldn't have been in the league yet. Edwards and Halliburton still aren't in the league. Banchero is still really new in the league. Ja Morant, Zion Williamson, Giannis is still he would go back-to-back MVP at those next so that Raptor season and then the season after that, and then go Finals MVP. So you get the full Giannis ascension, the full Jokic ascension, and Embiid ascension as well too. Booker, again, just like the amount of talent in the league that has grown over the last 6 years has definitely been incredible. So maybe it's the full on shift now where we'll wait for Sam to talk about, I think, a little bit more about like what's going on in the future with these teams, because there are some things that I definitely want to ask him about when it comes to the Mavs and Celtics and just the league in general. But I will say, I don't know in terms of dynasty where you can go with this Celtics team, because Wilbon was making this point after the finals as well, too, that the league is just so talented. There's so many good teams. You're looking at next season. You just, especially in the West, I get the East, maybe with Giannis being healthy, Embiid, what the Sixers do, the Knicks retooling, like, the East is definitely going to be much stronger than it was this year, assuming everything goes up. Yeah, if everybody stays healthy, obviously, then it'll definitely be a more competitive conference. But, the West is going to be totally stacked. So just the night to night, the 82 games, it's going to be really competitive. And I do really think, now looking at that Celtics record as well, too, really impressive that they were able to pull together, a 60 plus win regular season. And then again, in the Eastern Conference, be this dominant, but to still have the record that they did with the talent in the league right now. But, it does feel like, I don't want to say teams are a couple of moves away, because this next draft might not be the best, but the 2025 draft definitely seems like there's some studs lined up for there. So who knows if we just get back on track for, studs, asking for high profile guys in the draft every year is probably a little bit too much to ask for, but it's definitely what we've been grown accustomed to. So maybe we just get back on track to guys can just sort of add these top tier talent. But it does seem like, again, just with the amount of talent, that there are more teams in the mix now than ever to win the title. So maybe that's the shift, where it was one team is now in control versus it seems like there's more teams. I don't want to say than ever, but definitely, in the recent, what I've been watching, from what I can remember, this definitely seems, again, maybe not wide open is the term, but the most stacked in terms of the amount of competitive teams. And I'm even still throwing, again, somehow Wemby is just going to get brought up 12 times in the first 10 minutes on a Celtics just won the finals pod. But, depending on what they do, that just could be a competitive, potentially feisty team. Wemby could just be a hard out for any team. And let's just say I'll give the rest of the league the benefit of the doubt and say in the play-in game for the Spurs as well, too. I won't seem like I'm too optimistic going into next season. But I will say, watching the Boston fans celebrate and just every year watching another team win the title, it's like, oh man, we got to. I mean, Buford, Pop, if you guys want to call and ask questions about how to get this Spurs team back and winning the title, please, we got to get one. Every year watching these teams celebrate the finals, it hurts so bad. But just want to see the Spurs get another one. And we're definitely closer to Everton now with Wemby. But again, I do think that the league is incredibly stacked. And I do think that sort of feeling definitely shifted over the course of this season. So, going into next season, I do think it's going to be a fun season to watch because the Celtics are definitely going to be heavily favored again in the Eastern Conference as well, too. And they were favored this year, I think, a lot more heavily than people realize because they were the number one title favorite for every day of the season. I don't know if I'm getting that stat totally correct, but I think that's a stat I saw at one point on ESPN, which is kind of incredible. And again, it goes to the Eastern Conference, which we will continue to point out time and time again. Settle down, Boston fans. I mean, don't make no mistake. Enjoy it. But the rest of the league, again, is a little sick that not just Boston won it, but nobody, the other 29 teams, no matter who is the team that wins it, is going to be pretty happy or not happy. But I wonder who would have been the number one most happy title team person won a title, because even if the Mavs have got a title, like it would have kind of been out of nowhere. I don't know what Luka's approval. I think the kids really like Luka, but maybe the dads. I don't know if they like the way that he complains after the foul calls. I don't know what the overall approval rating for the Mavs and Luka Doncic. Maybe the Thunder. I think the Thunder had pretty good vibes. Edwards as well too. But again, I don't know. The Spurs Timberwolves, because it goes back to the Garnett Duncan rivalry. There is like a little big brother, little brother thing with the Spurs Timberwolves. So if the Timberwolves just like, and maybe I shouldn't say that. IT, cut that out. We don't want to give any bulletin board for Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards, make no mistake, you're more established than anybody on the Spurs had with what you've done in the playoffs so far. But if the Timberwolves just totally broke through and won the title, it would have been a little disappointing for Spurs fans anyway. So not 100% approval rating for the Timberwolves. Honestly, if the Knicks had gotten a title this year, I think the NBA world would have been pretty happy. And it's tough because New York is a sports city. I feel like the rest of the sports world doesn't necessarily wish good things on New York. And it's not like they're wishing bad things on New York. Maybe the Boston and the Philly people are, but the rest, the Midwestern people, and maybe the West Coast is, but the Midwest is anyways not, there's no bad wishes on New York, but I don't think there's any usually like good wishes toward like the Giants and the Jets and the baseball teams or anything like that. But the Knicks have been through, and the Knicks fans have been through so much that if Brunson and somehow they'd stayed healthy and it was a miracle run, that I think maybe the NBA world would have been pretty happy with that as well too. Giannis is pretty high approval rating in the league. Dame as well too. If Dame had finally gotten a ring, and if the Bucks had won a title, it would have been because Dame and Giannis had just played it at an incredible. Dame just was like on an incredible hot streak. Maybe Dame pulls a Jaylen Brown, and second fiddle, but really a 1A combo for the Celtics. But as the perceived number two gets super hot in the playoffs, and is the reason that they're able to win the title. If Dame had won a title, that would have been a pretty high approval rating as well too. But I think the Tatum and Brown combo is, I think the rest of the basketball world has good feelings for the Tatum and Brown combo. And to be honest, I think it might be harder for people to get on fans' bad sides now than they're good sides. And maybe it's just me, but I don't know if I necessarily sports hate people the way that I used to. And as I'm saying it, I'm like, it's not true. But even as I'm saying it's not true, the players, the main guys that I have, sports hate toward would be guys that did things, it's like Ray Allen in the Ray Allen shot. So I was, 12, 13 when that shot happened. So it would still have been sporting events from the childhood and guys from those sporting events. So I'm trying to think of any modern day sports guys like Chris Paul hitting the bank shot game 7 on the Clippers over the Spurs. I've always had a little like side eye for Chris Paul after that. Like the Manning Brady rivalry, Colts Patriots rivalry runs pretty deep. So it's hard to give the side eye for Brady after a while. Brady is one of the few guys that kind of went full circle. LeBron as well too. I know I'm maybe just speaking from a Spurs fan perspective, but he also went full circle in terms of sports hate, because in those Spurs Heat days, again, it wasn't just Ray Allen, the big three, that combo, he was a perceived villain in the league, but because I think the Spurs were playing them in the finals and losing to them in the finals that season specifically, there was a little bit of a different level to it. Maybe like Boston and Indiana as well too would have had a equal-ish rivalry to the Heat at that time. The Knicks, maybe a little bit. I doubt there's any rivalry on the court anyways between the LeBron James Knicks and the Carmelo Anthony, or the LeBron Heat and the Carmelo Knicks. They would have really liked it to have been the LeBron Knicks, but unfortunately that didn't happen. But he came around, and I fully support, there's no sports hate now for LeBron whatsoever. And the fact that he's on the Lakers and there's no sports hate for him as a Spurs fan might even be more impressive. Shout out RIP our guy Kobe, but because of the Spurs rivalry, the Shaq Kobe, Duncan Shaq, all of the rivalry between them in the early 2000s, there was always a little side eye for Kobe as well too later in his career. But I don't think there's a ton of sports hate in general for the Boston combo of Tatum and Brown. I'm getting sidetracked. And I was saying, I wonder if slide in the DMs. Is it harder for you guys to sports hate people now in general? Because I feel like, it's just everybody's super into just in players. I don't want to say more than teams, but just people are more willing, and fans are more willing to support players outside of their own teams now, especially more than general. So just by byproduct of that, I feel like they're searching more for the guys that they like than the guys that they don't like in the highlights. And I'm not saying that guys don't there's guys that still maybe guys that mess up in real life. They obviously don't count. There's guys that do things that everybody turns a side eye to, and maybe even worse than that. And, there are guys that obviously you got to make jokes about and roast when certain things happen. But just in terms, again, of that super sports hate, maybe it just speaks to the fact that the teams that I root for haven't been super competitive in a while as well too. But the Harrison twins, was it Aaron Harrison that hit the game winner over Michigan? I think Aaron Harrison was the 3-point shooter and Andrew Harrison was the point guard back in the Kentucky team. That would have been the Trey Burke, Michigan, Tim Hardaway Jr. days. But shout out to Tatum and Brown anyways for winning the title. Again, no bad feelings toward them. I think and especially the fact that it took as long as it did for them to make, finally put all the pieces together, make not necessarily the run, because they've been in the finals before, but to finally cap off the run and win the ring. It's like they've definitely earned the title versus sort of, bursting onto the scene. Maybe if they win it a little younger and there's some rivalry, and, any sort of dynasty after a while just becomes annoying. It's like, okay, give somebody else a turn. One of our other teams, we want to win one here eventually. But, they've been through the ringer. They've been through the trial by fire. They've had all the playoff ups and downs. So it's about time that they finally claim their ring. We're back. Had a little connection issue. If there's one stat that the Rem and Sam podcast leads the league in, it is connection issues. Make no mistake. It's just what it is. But I don't remember exactly where we're at. But anyways, just to continue to give people their due credit for winning this NBA title. Again, shout out to the Boston Celtics. But I was I was going to say continue to give people their due credit. Then I was going to say I was a little surprised about the fact that Jaylen Brown won the MVP. Again, I was surprised, I think, in the way that he was surprised by winning the conference finals MVP, where he was kind of like, I never win anything. And I think I definitely read into that statement. But I think, like has been for most of the Celtics run, and deservedly so. Like Tatum has been sort of the most recognized guy from that Celtics core. So the fact that Brown was kind of like, oh, I guess it's my turn to be recognized. It's my turn to have my moment. He's a little, but like, okay, it's actually happening now. And, again, in the same way that he was surprised by that, I was surprised that that recognition continued in the finals, because early in the finals, it definitely looked like it was going to be Jaylen Brown. But I thought over the course of, what was a short finals, but over the course of it, Tatum, one, he ended up playing a lot better, and especially in the closing game, and just, shot the ball a lot better, had a couple of 30-point games, but just continued, because of that, continued to, his importance just in that offense continued to be magnified, and the amount of things that they do, and the fact that everything runs through him. And I think, like we were saying too, on one of the last episodes, that, again, he is the point guard on that team, where you have the guards in Holiday and White, but really Tatum is the point guard. They run everything through Tatum. So the fact that he was able to turn the shooting part of it around and have the 30-point performances, and everybody on that team was really great defensively when they were locked in, but he as well too, locking in defensively. I thought he had kind of stolen the finals MVP a little bit, but Brown, again, totally deserving of winning it. So again, not surprised that he had won it, but I'm just surprised that Tatum didn't swoop in and steal it. I guess I'm contradicting myself a little bit, but that's I did thought he played well enough to turn it back around and be in the mix. And if he had won it, I definitely wouldn't have been surprised whatsoever. But I was also thinking that, again, it's not that everybody deserved the finals MVP. And that's kind of the problem. It's not that nobody deserved it. It's kind of that everybody deserved it. Brown had his games where he played so well. Tatum had his games where he played incredibly well. And again, his importance in the offense, but also Holiday as well too, where his two-way impact, his rebounding, especially in the last game, offensive rebounding was incredible. And the shooting that he had, and the playmaking, and the pick and rolls, being the roll man and being able to just constantly finish around the rim. And he's always played bigger than he is, and that's been, I think, a thing for him defensively, but he was, again, really able to magnify that offensively with the rebounding and with the interior finishing. So I was kind of thinking with the finals MVP, because again, it's not like I feel so bad. I'm not trying to take away Jaylen Brown's finals MVP, but again, I felt like everybody there was a couple of guys that were kind of equally deserving. Tatum and Brown are a duo, and they have been, I don't want to, again, they haven't been equally recognized in this playoff or in this run that they've had together on this Celtics team. But I think now maybe the narrative going forward is these guys are maybe a little bit more on the same level. But I was thinking, does a player have to be the one that absolutely wins the finals MVP? Like, what if we throw the coach's name on the ballot? Or what if we throw the general manager's name on the ballot as well too? And if we threw Brad Stevens on the ballot, that's a tough one as well, because, well, not necessarily tough. He made incredible moves to win the title, but he didn't necessarily draft Tatum or Brown or make the trades that acquired the picks that they were able to use to get them on the team. He obviously was able to bring in Porzingis, bring in Holiday. I believe he made the Derek White trade as well too. I think the Derek White trade was the first move. Maybe clearing out the Kemba Walker contract was the first move that Brad Stevens made. But, the Derek White move, I believe, was early on in his tenure too. So he is responsible for a large majority of the core of this team. But I get the two main guys that were playing at a finals MVP level. He didn't necessarily have a hand in acquiring those guys. He did have a hand in, I guess, developing those guys as basketball talents, though, because he was the coach of the team when they got there and was the coach of the team until Udoka and then eventually Mazzulla ended up taking over. But I almost kind of wanted to give the finals MVP to Brad Stevens. Again, just for the team and just as a way to be like, maybe I'm saying Mazzulla, but just as a way to be like, this was sort of a team title. The team necessarily won this title. Again, that's not saying that no player, and I am saying it, but not in a bad way, that no player necessarily stood out above the rest. Like everybody had their moments and everybody contributed. And again, in was it game 3 where the game where Doncic fouls out? But that's the game where, that's the first game back in Dallas. It was 22-9. Tatum takes over in the first quarter, then in the first half of that game, and it's his scoring that's able to get them back in the game. And then Brown is the one in the fourth quarter that's able to take it home and able to close it out. So again, everybody in, his defense on Doncic, everybody taking their turns defensively on Doncic and Irving, and just the collective effort and everybody buying in. And again, I just thought that unit stood out as a unit in a way that not a lot of other teams necessarily have. And that's, like Denver last year was a really connected team. Like that was really good teamwork basketball. If Jokic is your superstar, there is going to be most likely an unselfish nature to which your team plays with. So no surprise there. But just the collective talent of this Celtics team is a little bit different than that Nuggets team. Maybe that Nuggets team last year is a little bit closer because, again, that's the team with Bruce Brown. And that makes, at that point, Christian Braun is your 7th man. They also had Jeff Green was big off the bench from in the finals, if I'm not mistaken. That's people are definitely going to forget about the Jeff Green contribution. Should we double check that? Is Jeff Green a 2-time NBA champion? Did he win one with the Cavs as well, too? No, just the one ring with I guess they would have lost. The Cavs would have lost in the finals that year, but he did. Yeah, the one ring with Denver, 17 minutes a game in the playoffs for our guy, Jeff Green. 32% for the entire playoffs in 20 games. So again, maybe not a performance that people will remember, but was definitely able to give him minutes. They probably could have used a little Jeff Green contribution in that Minnesota series at some point. But maybe the depth of that team, depth is clearly important to winning the finals. But I was like, if there was a way to reward the collective effort of the unit, that would have been a super cool way to do it as well, too, because I think that would have been a really good representation of what this team was in this finals run, where I think most finals MVPs are good representations of what the finals runs are. There are some that maybe I just call out guys, but like the Iguodala finals MVP, maybe I don't want to necessarily speak on the Cedric Maxwell MVP, but or even like the James Worthy MVP as well too in the finals. Because I remember I was looking at that series a couple weeks ago, just looking at the box score for that series, and Magic was like a double-double in that series, and his shooting was almost equal to what Worthy was putting up. And I don't know if there was a defensive thing with Worthy and maybe Magic was slipping on that end. I'm not sure, but it seemed like from a box score standpoint that Magic had the case to be in the mix. So maybe there's a couple that aren't perfect. And Magic was maybe the league MVP that year as well too. So I'm not sure what was going on. There's a couple of them that, you're going to look back and go, that's going to be interesting. But again, if there was like a way to say that this was a team, a team effort, and that there was big moments. Game 1, I think was, Jaylen Brown was awesome defensively in that game, but Porzingis, game 1 might just be the Porzingis game. And Porzingis is the MVP for game 1. And, I don't know if it's individual game MVPs is the way to go, but just they got the contributions from everybody all the way around. And there was, again, talk on ESPN afterwards about, actually, I think Doris Burke was the one that brought this up about, this is how you build a team going forward. Like you give them time to develop, and you have to give, like, time is important. You just got to make sure that you're not rushing things, but not also cutting things off too quickly as well too. I think, like what if a team with a couple of high powered stars out west was just had changing coaches every 2 years? is that like a stable way to necessarily try to run a contender? Like maybe you actually got to give time things to gel and come together. And chemistry as well too. I think we've said that, me and Sam talking together, that it's not just you have to have chemistry, but you also just, it's obvious, but you have to just be together. And that's what Doris Burke is saying. You have to be together a certain amount of time to actually develop that chemistry. So when, maybe you're a Midwestern team that fires your coach in the middle of the season, but you also traded your third, but maybe also your second best player, a two-way stud, ends up going to your rival contender. So you make a big roster move at the beginning of the season, and then you change your coach in the middle of the season. Maybe you're probably not going to develop the chemistry to win the title. And I get Giannis got hurt, but I'm just saying, with every team, you need to have a certain amount of time as well, too. But there is also, it's no surprise that these same teams keep winning these titles over and over again, because the ownership and the infrastructure is the team that I think the thing that I think goes overrated or under is the thing that goes underlooked with all of these teams and all of these organizations, because with the player empowerment thing and with the new era and just the, the love that we have for all these players right now, it's a great thing. But basketball is being thought of as it starts on the court and works backwards. It starts with the players and then the coaches and then the general managers, the front office, and the owners are probably the least impactful to what actually goes on with winning. And to some degree, that is like 100% true. At the end of the day, it is basketball. The players on the court are going to have to hit shots, but these are still, again, organizations, they're businesses. They're concerned about, making money as much as they are about winning titles, but they're actually, they're workplaces as well too. So any workplace, business, working environment is going to, if it's a good culture and it's going to be a successful culture, it's going to have to start from the top down. And that's going to be with ownership and with management. And it's no surprise, the teams with the good owners and the good general managers are able to time and time again turn over these competitive teams. And again, the Celtics have changed general managers since winning these two titles. Like I think Ainge was in at Boston at that point when they won the title in 2008. If I'm not mistaken, that probably would have been, early Ainge years. Yeah. So he got to Boston, in 2002, 2003. So was Ainge the one responsible for assembling the Paul Pierce, Antoine Walker thing? I think Paul Pierce was in 90s. Those guys were 90s draft guys. So probably not, but maybe he definitely kept that team around a little bit. He's like, I'm just interested in seeing what the Antoine Walker, Paul Pierce run is interested in. But they have changed to Brad Stevens since then as well too. And if you look at them and like the Spurs and even like the Mavs as well too, who maybe are not year to year the most competitive team like a team like the Celtics, but have now been, in the finals twice in the same amount of span that the Celtics have been in the finals now twice, 3 times with that series against Golden State, 2 rings for Boston, 1 ring for the Mavs. I guess the Mavs, I always forget about that Dirk Wade Miami series, but 3 appearances for them as well too. So they've always, that would have been with Cuban in there, and Cuban is still hands-on with that team at this point. And this is still, up until this season exactly, was a Cuban-led team from an ownership standpoint. So his impact would still definitely be felt this year, even if he had stepped away completely. But again, like the Spurs, for example, they constantly have organizational change and are losing guys and hiring guys out. They've been able to keep a couple of really important main pieces. Pop, for example, R.C. Buford, for example, as well too. But again, the teams that are the bad teams kind of always stay the bad teams, and the teams that are the good teams are able to stay the good teams. And there is also something I think too, to maybe not fully tanking out is actually the way to go. Because again, now my mindset as a basketball fan has kind of shifted in what I'm looking for. Just, I guess what I'm interested in terms of building a team, because up until, between like the Kawhi Leonard run and up until getting Wemby, it was getting a star player. And the Spurs were a team that, again, had never fully tanked out, but it was, what's the best path to it is just tanking out and trying to get back in the lottery and getting a player in the draft the quickest way, to try to get back and rebuild. That was always kind of the question that was lingering on my mind. But now that, we actually have that star player from the lottery, the questions are shifting a little bit. And, again, time is important, but, again, the Spurs also never fully tanked out as well, too. They did tank, obviously, for Wemby, but they've also admittedly gotten super lucky in the years that they've tanked and the lotteries themselves to actually win the number one picks to get these generational guys. Like, yeah, there is a little bit of luck involved, maybe a lot of luck involved in getting those players. I'm not, obviously that can't, even as a Spurs fan, that can't go without saying, but they never, and even the Celtics between the two title wins with the Pierce run and this Tatum run, never like fully, completely bottom out in the way that we see some of these other franchises have to do. And, the Celtics as well, too. And this is something that Sam, I think, has been very, definitely kept and made note of when it comes to team building. But they were very, I don't know if ruthless is the right word, but, they were very cold-hearted in the way that they dealt with their players. Like Garnett and Allen weren't necessarily homegrown talents, but they moved on from them when they thought, hey, we've got good value, and that value that we're going to get for those players is going to be better than the on-court values than those players are actually going to give us. And they made that move when they made the time. And Sam was saying this for the Warriors with their big three and the situation that they were in. And do you want to continue to put a title contender around Steph? And if you want to try to maximize the last couple of his years of his career, can you do that with the big three? Like, honestly, looking at it now, the right move probably would have been to trade those guys. And Clay now, as I know if you guys are following the offseason stuff, like he's unfollowed the Warriors from all the social accounts. There are, I know Draymond was saying he might not be worried about it. I don't know if that's been his thoughts or other Warriors players' thoughts have been updated since then, but there have been major breadcrumbs that Klay Thompson is leaving and that this Warriors dynasty might be run, and he might walk for nothing. And if you're going to, you would need those assets more so than just the extra cap space. And he's probably not even going to give you cap space because they're in the luxury tax already. Anyways, I'm sure that they're not a team in a position to get cap space from Klay Thompson just not being on the books and losing his cap hold. But, the Celtics made some cold-hearted moves and made some moves where they necessarily didn't think with their heart when it comes to the on the court stuff. But, again, they always maintained a certain level of competitiveness, and winning was always sort of the main goal. And maybe that is the important thing as well, too, where, these other tanking teams, it's not just that they even getting in a losing culture year to year, like the Sixers with Sam Hinkie. Maybe even just one season or a season and a half or whatever might even just be too much, because, even the Spurs last season, I think yeah, maybe the Spurs are just masterful tankers with the way they just just don't play defense and we'll let these games slip away in the fourth quarter, and nobody will. And, we don't really have a star player anyway, so nobody will question that we're losing all these games, and, we'll just sneak in there and the league will just give us Wembanyama. Maybe the Spurs are just masterful tankers, but there always was a competitiveness to the team where it did feel like they were trying to at least play. And again, like it was guys that they drafted. It's not like they stripped the team and brought in two-way guys. They traded some of, DeRozan and Aldridge, and they moved on, but it was all understandable what they were doing at that point. The Murray thing as well, too. doesn't go in the cold-hearted category because I think Murray was looking to have a bigger role on a team, but also be on a team that was a little bit more competitive right away as well too. So, I think both sides were a little more willing to make that move versus them just, like cutting ties with Garnett and Allen and Paul Pierce and whatever. But, they got the value back that overvalued the on-court production, and they made the move at the right time. And they got the high draft pick, and the Celtics didn't even need to tank because they got the high picks from the Nets as well too. So that's like a sneaky little safety net that the organization had in terms of being able to maintain a competitive team. You just have another dysfunctional organization just be bad for you, and you get to reap the benefits of that. It's always nice. I mean, it basically won him a title. So I guess shout out to Sean Marks for or not, it's not Sean Marks, Bobby Marks, one of the Marks brothers. One of the manifesto guys assembled the Brooklyn Nets and was able to get able to give the Boston Celtics their title. But, again, just I think there is a culture of prioritizing winning and not being like, hey, we're just going to totally strip down and totally, commit to, like with the Spurs. I think maybe a couple of months ago, I would have been more open to the idea of, hey, if they're a bad team next year with Wemby, and let's get back in the mix, Cooper Flag, one of the other guys, Sam was saying Ace Bailey, like one of these other guys that are in the mix for the top pick. Like if they were another tanking team for another year and trying to get another high draft pick, I would have been more open-minded to that. But now I'm thinking that, you don't want to make decisions and overspend to be a 45 win team. That's not what I'm saying, but not going the way of losing is okay. Like if the Spurs are going to be the 8th pick in the draft next year, but again, be smart about the way they build their team, but it's just not quite enough. Maybe the star player secondary addition wasn't quite right there, but they got a couple of very high value role guys. And you're like, okay, this guy can be a very valuable trade piece, or this guy is just a great guy to have on your team if you were able to, just putting yourself in position to add the piece and just be, getting closer to being 1 move away from being 1 move away, the 2 years away from being 2 years away. But, if all of their offseason moves in the season bears out to be the 8th pick in the draft and they miss out on all the top end talent, but it was like, hey, we really maximized what we got, and we felt like we really grew as a team, and we valued the right things. And I think you almost have to consider that a win of a season because, once you get the star player, I think again now, like we were saying too, with the talent that's out there, maybe there's just a secondary star that's going to become available more often just because there's more guys in that talent in the, hovering in that talent area in the league. Those are big picture questions that we have to get talk to Sam with to straighten him up about. But again, I just think really this title to me was like ownership, infrastructure, and just, that solid foundation all the way down. And I think even for the players, the playoffs ups and downs and the scars, like this buildup was the longest, I think, buildup for any team in terms of winning that first title for any group in NBA history. So that might be aggressive, but I'll have to go back and double check. But I think that could be right. Definitely for our guy, Al Horford, who was getting blue balls on the title there for a minute, waiting 186 postseason games, but over, a decade and a half long career as well, and 2 in the league. The 2007 draft for our guy, Al Horford, shout out, which a fun draft as well too, and really upped his standing in any potential 2007 redraft. Durant, obviously, number 1. Al Horford's going to have to do a lot of work in his late 30s to try to catch up to Kevin Durant. But I think the other main guys are Horford and then Conley and Marc Gasol. So the Horford-Marc Gasol thing is kind of fun in terms of a big man. Would you rather 2007 draft? Slide in the DMs. Would you rather Al Horford or Marc Gasol? Tell us what you guys would think. Then you got Conley as well too. You got the big man versus the guard. But Horford being on a title team, I would say neither of those other guys have, but Gasol he got traded to that Raptors team with Kawhi, mid-season that year. So he got that ring. Conley is still hoping that the Minnesota thing works out, and maybe he gets back in the mix for the 07 redraft. But Horford, right now, it's his moment to shine from that class. And the fact that, Durant, Horford, and Conley still hanging on pretty strong here in the league. Again, almost not quite 20 years, but what, like 16, 17 years, 17, 18, 19 years? I guess we could just look up and see how many seasons Al Horford has played, because apparently we can't do math off the top of our head. But pause. But 17 seasons for a guy, Al Horford. That took too long to do, but we got it all calculated, and he finally gets the NBA title. So 3 guys still kicking in the league 17 years later. Might be a record. I wonder, the 03 draft might have had a couple of guys hanging out in there. IT will do the research, and we'll put the numbers up somewhere, or we'll shout them on the Friday pod. But again, shout out Brown for winning the Finals MVP. Shout out Tatum for being. I think it's just important that Tatum got to that point where it was like, okay, he was at least deserving of the Finals MVP from a legacy standpoint. Again, having games, especially Game 5, where he was, again, just brilliant scoring the ball, the playmaking. Did he have like 11 assists in that game? And maybe it was rebound, but almost pushing a triple-double, I thought, at 1.2. So really just an impressive all-around performance from Tatum. Really, what are they going to say now? Going for all the iconic quotes. Jason Tatum just pulling out all the lines. Jason Tatum has a dream, but he definitely earned the right to talk his talk anyways for a little while until we get back to next season. But like I said, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to dethrone this Celtics team. I know it might not be next year for San Antonio. It might not even be the year after that. I get it. Again, the Celtics had to wait 7 or 8 seasons. So if it ever is going to happen with Wemby, Lord willing, we're saying our prayers every night. But if it is ever going to happen with Wembanyama, we get there might be a little bit of a process, and it might be a waiting period. We might have to be patient, but that doesn't mean we're not going to be competitive and not going to try. Stephen A was saying this about the Mavs as well too on the halftime, which I thought Bob Myers on the other end of the table was being a little pushbacky on it, with Stephen A saying that, hey, the Mavs, I get you're down 3-1 and I get you're down 20 at halftime, but can we see you try in the second half? And Myers was kind of like, hey, man, we just, the Celtics, it's overwhelming. It's too much. There's not a whole lot that the Mavs can do. And that's Myers being in the league, being around the players, I think trying to necessarily focus the conversation away from the way that Stephen A likes to take the conversation, maybe a little more critically. But, I do think that the Mavs could have put up a little bit more of a fight than they did. Maybe just a smidge. But again, the Celtics, overwhelming. Not a lot you can do. The crowd was really into it, and it was just their time. They earned it. They deserved it. So I guess they hang banner number 18 right next to all the Bill Russell banners and the Bird banners. I mean, banner 18. The Bill Russell banners, they have to be their own separate thing. I get the Celtics fans, Boston, he means a lot to you. You absolutely have the right to totally claim him. But I just he is almost ascended above all of basketball at this point. He's like he's a Jedi ghost of basketball. Is that the right term for those guys afterwards? Is Darth Vader a Jedi ghost? I think he is in the Lego video game. That's mainly what I'm thinking of. Shout out to the DS, the Lego video game on the DS. Shout out to those days. But he is one of the few ghost level legend, just mega legendary figures in basketball. He's kind of his own thing at this point. So it's you have the 13 Bill Russell titles, and then you have, your 5 other ones are pretty cool. So shout out to Boston for winning their 5th non-Bill Russell title. That's pretty awesome. And I think you guys should be very, very proud. You're now tied with the Spurs for the amount of non-Bill Russell titles that you have in the league. I honestly, I guess the Warriors would have more non-Bill Russell titles than the Celtics. The Lakers technically have more Bill Russell titles than the Celtics. I know there is some controversy about the Lakers titles, but even still, Magic himself won 5 rings, and then Kobe won 5. So is that 10 right there? Non-Bill Russell title non-Bill Russell title for the Lakers. Yeah, 5. I was almost sure it was 5 for Magic, but that number is just like, it's ridiculous. I know it's 9 titles and 9 appearances in 12 years for Magic Johnson, but taking the belt home 5 times, you're 1 away from the Bulls matching that non-Bill Russell title count for the Bulls, because they have 6 MJ titles. So maybe if the Tatum and Brown duo can get another one, then you'll be in the mix. Then you'll be 1 away from the Warriors at that point. So you'll continue to climb and continue to, work your way up there as one of the better franchises in basketball. Solid performance, pretty good non-Bill Russell basketball history, I would say. Am I counting that right? 5? I guess Bill Russell played 13 seasons and won 11 titles. So they have 7 Bill Russell, because I forgot about the Cowens and Havlicek ones in there for a second too. I know the early 70s Celtics, poor Cowens. He almost slipped my mind. But so there you go. You've now passed MJ and you're tied with the Warriors. The Celtics fans were just screaming like, hey, no, we don't. We've got 7 non-Bill Russell titles. Okay. You've got 7. That's pretty cool. Maybe hopefully the Tatum and Brown will get the 8th, but maybe the basketball hate will be back for the Tatum and Brown combo. We'll see how annoying the Celtics fans are online this offseason as they continue to claim the belt. But to be honest, didn't seem too bad. But I'm also not really online either, so I'm not the guy to judge and gauge the reaction. But knowing Boston, they'll make sure to come out of the weeds and talk their talk at some point in the summer when things are dying down. When something will happen in the Olympics, and Boston will be like, yeah, but we won the NBA Finals this year. And it's like, well, but the gymnast just got the perfect score on the mat that's never got the perfect score before. I don't know how that compares to the Tatum thing, but somehow the Celtic fans will compare it to, I don't know, the election or whatever. They'll be annoying and figure out a way to make it happen. But I guess we have to say congratulations. Shout out to the Mavs as well, too. Incredible run. 50 wins. Not necessarily. You'll never catch me being sad about the Mavs losing in the NBA Finals. But, an underdog story is never the worst thing in the world as well, too. So shout out to Luka Doncic. We like our guy Doncic. And we're always happy that he's at least breaking through and continuing to check boxes, because the expectations for this guy, were about as high as any other, player that's ever joined the league. A top 10 expectations guy, maybe. I'm not the historian to ask, but up there anyways in recent history for expectations, and continuing to ascend tiers and climb levels, go up the ladder, shoot some ladders, all that stuff for Luka Doncic. But we will be back this weekend with Sam. He will be rejoining us. I think he's kicked the family out, so he will be back on the pod. Or he just knew that he was going to be annoyed with them after a week, and he just would want to be back on anyways. Either way, he will hopefully be rejoining us. Just Sam? I don't know. I don't want to say too much, but we don't want to promise anything on the Rem and Sam pod. But follow the Rem and Sam pod, Rem and Sam podcast, at Rem and Sam. We're going to be, throw one of those handles in the search on, whatever social platform you want. And we'll be out there at Rem and Sam, at Rem and Sam podcast on Instagram, TikTok, Spotify, YouTube, all across the internet. Stay tuned. Thank you guys for listening. Have a good night.